Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here with Switch Adapted Toys, and today I'm really excited to show you our new version 2 3D printed mini switch. Our first mini switch came out about a year ago, but we've updated this one to include the same screw on top that our standard switch and our mega switch have. What's nice is that the tops can be interchanged for different colors if you prefer, and it makes it a lot easier for assembly, but it still offers this really great low force activation and kind of responsiveness that our other switches have. So I'm going to show you how to build and assemble this switch, but if you just stumbled across this video or you never heard about Switch Adapted Toys, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to make play possible for kiddos of all abilities. We do that by creating 3D printed switches, as well as creating how-to videos and tutorials teaching people how to switch adapt toys. So basically taking toys off the shelf and rewiring them so that they can be activated using a switch like this one that can be kind of placed anywhere and kind of make the toy more accessible for kiddos with disabilities. So if that's something that you're interested in, I encourage you to check out our website at www.switchtoys.org. And if you like this video or if you find it helpful, make sure you hit the like button and hit subscribe to stay up to date on all our latest videos. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing that we need to do is download the files off of our website. So if you go to www.switchtoys.org and sign up for an account, which is completely free, you can go to our resource hub and our file library, and there you will find the 3D printed mini switch files. Download those files onto your computer and you'll find the STL model for our switch, which we'll use to load into your slicing software for your 3D printer, as well as a document kind of explaining all the settings that we use on our 3D printers to print this out. So we're not going to go into too much detail on specifics on slicing the file and printing the file, because every 3D printer and slicing software is different. But you can use the settings that we use and kind of adjust accordingly and end up with a really good high quality switch. Alright, so once your switch is finished printing, you can remove it from the build plate and remove any of the support material that's on the switch top. And there are a couple other things that we're going to need to build this switch. The first thing is we need a mechanical keyboard switch. Specifically, we use the Cherry MX Speed Silver. We like this switch because it requires very little force to activate, both in terms of like the force needed to push down the switch and the amount of travel that there is before it activates. So basically that translates to a really responsive switch, which is great for a lot of kiddos. Now, I think they're starting to phase these switches out. So I'll put a link to the new version of this in the link below. You might still be able to find these online, but they are getting harder and harder to find. The last thing you're going to need is a mono headphone jack cable. This is a 6-foot long cable that we're basically going to end up cutting in half so that we have a 3-foot cable. We'll have two 3-foot cables. You want to find a mono one. Definitely, it's worth the time and the money to get a mono cable instead of a stereo cable. You know it's a mono cable because it will just have a tip and a sleeve. Stereo cables will have another black ring. You'll have a tip, ring, and sleeve. So just find a mono. It makes things so much easier. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this cord in half. So I'm just going to use some snips and just cut it right in half. If you wanted a longer cable, you could just cut off one of the male ends and just have a 6-foot cable, but a 3-foot cable is more than enough. Alright, so before I remove the casing on my headphone jack wire, it's a good idea to fish it through the hole in the base. And there isn't a lot of space inside this base, so you might need to use something to kind of help you get that wire out the top. And I'm just going to pull out some extra slack. And now we can go ahead and remove the black casing on the wire. And now we can remove the tips of the casing on the interior wires. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just wrap the exposed wire around the prong on the switch. So there's 2 prongs, and so we're going to wrap one wire around each, and I'm just going to use some tweezers and just kind of wrap it around. Doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be kind of neat, and there just needs to be a lot of wires on that prong to make a good connection. What you don't want is a bunch of stray wires hanging around, which could potentially like cross to the other side and kind of short things out. So just make sure you get everything nice and neat. The solder is what's actually going to be doing the connections here and keeping everything in place. But this also just kind of helps keep everything stationary when we go to solder. Now we'll just solder those wires to those prongs. Just like that. All right, so now is a good time to test and make sure that everything works before we go ahead and put the top on. So I just plugged it into this little box. I just made this. It just will light up this LED whenever the button's pressed. You could also just use a already adapted toy, just something to know that your switch works. So here we go. When I press this button, this red LED should light up. There we go. So next we need to prevent a child from like yanking this cord and just disconnecting everything. So how we're gonna do that is there's a groove that goes around the outside of the housing, which holds the switch in place. And we just kind of gonna get the cord kind of off to one side, and we're gonna work it around that housing. And I'm not pushing it into place just yet, because what I like to do first is kind of get the switch into the housing to begin with. Press that into place, and now I kind of work backwards. So I'm just kind of gonna go around the outside, pushing that wire down and kind of pulling out the slack out the end as we go. So once I got everything kind of in place, you can use a flathead screwdriver or just something small. I'm using the back side of my tweezers just to kind of work that cord down and kind of get it to sit at the base of our switch. And now for a little extra security, I'm going to put a little bead of super glue or CA glue kind of down into that groove, just to kind of lock it into place. You don't need too much. And if you have it, you can use some activator spray. And they'll basically instantly dry that super glue. And once that glue is dried, we can go ahead and screw on our top. And it's a good idea just to make sure that it works still. So let's plug in our toy or my light again, and let's just make sure. There we go. All right, so that's pretty much it for our mini switch. It kind of joins our lineup of 3D printed switches. We've got our mega switch, which is pretty much the biggest button out there, our standard switch, and now our mini switch. And they all offer that same great responsiveness and light force activation. So it's a really great high quality switch that I think you're really gonna enjoy. If all this seems kind of daunting to you, or you don't have access to a 3D printer, we do sell all of these switches on our Etsy shop, and the proceeds help support what we're doing here. So making these videos, making this content and these tutorials for you. So if you want to just pick one up that way, you can find our Etsy shop in the link in the description below. And if you've got a group or an organization and you want to adapt toys kind of on a bigger scale for kids in your community, you could form what we call a switch chapter, where we kind of help guide you through that process so that you can bring switch adapted toys to your community. If you want to find out more about our switch chapters, you could do so on our website at www.switchtoys.org. If you like this video or if you find it helpful, make sure you hit the like button and hit subscribe to stay up to date on all our latest videos. It really does help us out in a huge way, so thank you in advance for doing that. We really appreciate it. Well, that's it. My name's Eric with Switch Adapted Toys, and we'll see you next time.
Switch Adapted Toys, making play possible.